Hello and welcome to another SonicLAB. Today I'm looking at a pair of speakers, which is a bit of a tricky thing to review, and I will warn you now that there'll be a lot of talking and not a lot of sound in this, because obviously the only way I could get you to hear these speakers would be by miking them up and then playing them over YouTube, which would just be kind of weird. But anyway, these are the new Ik Multimedia iLoud Precision monitors. What I have here are the iLoud Precision 6, which bizarrely contain a 6.5-inch driver, not a 6-inch driver, but there's a full range. There are three in the new range. There's the iLoud 5 MTM, which gives you two 5-inch bass drivers. The iLoud 6, which is what we've got here, which is a 6 bass driver and single tweeter, and the iLoud 5, which gives you a 5-inch driver and the same tweeter. Now, these are sort of following on from IK's pretty successful sort of first foray into studio monitors. These were the iLoud Micro and the iLoud MTM. These were little desktop monitors that really tried to kind of make extremely well calibrated but very sort of personal desktop monitoring experiences, so you could get a substantially larger sound than those speakers actually contained, because they used DSP for things like time alignment, frequency response and whatnot, self-powered speakers. This full range is also self-powered, but what they're trying to do with these we think is kind of up the game. These are bigger, louder, more powerful, and have a wider frequency range, and they're sort of further up the food chain. These are entering into the sort of more substantial studio monitor market, which, you know, you can spend thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds on these. These are actually, for what they are trying to achieve, are very reasonably priced. These iLoud Precision 6 are, even though, you know, they're still expensive, they're £999 UK each. The iLoud MTM, the dual 5-inch drivers, these are, I think, £1199 each, and the 5-inch ones are £899 each. So yes, you could buy, they don't come in pairs, you could buy them in, you know, for a 5-1 system or whatever you want. But before we get into that, I just want to say thanks very much to Soundtoys for sponsoring this video. We've got a short message from them and then we'll get right back to it.
Pulling inspiration from a massive collection of classic gear, Soundtoys plugins capture the sound and character of analog hardware, but with a little something extra. With award-winning effects like Echo Boy, Decapitator, Little Alter Boy, and the Soundtoys Effect Rack for combining the plugins into endless ideas, Soundtoys has always been about developing great sounding effects with real character that are also just fun and inspiring. So for mixing or whatever audio you're working with, Soundtoys encourages you to explore, experiment, and enjoy.
So what we have here is a 6.5-inch ultralight coated paper low distortion mid woofer and a 1.5-inch high output low distortion chambered textile dome tweeter. Round the back we have all the extra gubbins. These are actually powered on. These are ported. We've got a bass port here, as you can see, level control, and these are controls for changing the frequency response of the speaker, so you can have it sort of flat or, you know, plus or minus one. I'm not sure the exact amount, but there's also a calibration button here, which you calibrate these speakers and you can set them to be uncalibrated, calibrated for desktop, or just calibrated to the room. There's also an XLR combi input, which takes the input because it's an analog input speaker. By the way, the Class D amp in here is 150 watts total power. There's also a little input for the ARC mic. Each speaker comes with one of these microphones which you can plug in, and that allows you to calibrate it using the X Monitor software. We'll show you a little bit of that later on. 90 to 240 volt 3-pin IEC input and a power switch. Would quite like to have seen the power switch on the front, actually, just because, you know, I prefer that. There's also a USB input for setting up with the monitor control, and these little remote control ports. Now, this doesn't come with the iLoud Precision, but there's a little iLoud remote control which gives you buttons that will perform different functions, whether it be EQ curves or different speaker models or whatnot, but we'll get onto that in a bit. And they will connect between the two speakers. In my situation, in the studio here, I had them really far apart because that's what we have in the studio, and I didn't have actually quite enough length. So if you're planning to put them like a really long piece apart, you'll need to get an extension cable, because I have the cable here. It's actually got 3 connections. It's a non-standard cable. Right, there's actually DSP in here, and this is done, they're in here for a number of reasons. And this is where we're going to get a little bit technical, because what Ik Multimedia have tried to do with this is to basically make a really high-end studio monitor at a budget. Oh, I should also point out, these cabinets are sort of really solid. I guess it's some sort of composite wood thing. They're heavy and really do feel very sturdy. Indeed, what the Ik very proud of the fact that these are made in Italy, and I don't know whether that means all of the parts are sourced in Italy, but it's certainly assembled in Italy. But and as part of that process, they're all kind of manually calibrated within 0.5 of a dB, so they should be pretty solid. Okay, the DSP in these is used for a number of reasons. First of all, we've got the extended frequency response. It gives it a very flat response. In fact, if I go to my graph behind me, which you can see actually here, this is from the Ik Multimedia website, and essentially what they have is that they're comparing it to an 8K pair of studio monitors, say $8,000, and the white or the light blue line is their line, and it is really, really flat. And this is something they're very proud of, and what they've kind of done this throughout the marketing of this kind of shows what they're using the DSP for. So certainly, in terms of frequency response, these go from 36 Hertz up to 30K. Just think about that for a bit. I mean, that is an astonishing amount. Their internal operating sample rate is 96K, 24 bits. So hopefully you're going to get everything you need. I mean, yes, it's not analog, but that's one thing that the DSP is doing. Next slide, please. Right, this one shows the time alignment and the phase alignment. The thing about the time alignment, what this does is it creates all the frequencies will arrive at the same time. So we get a very clear image, and you can see the graph here. Basically, again, the blue line compared to what is ideal, which is the white line, and it's very close to that. The 8K pair and the 8K pair 2, obviously unnamed, well, they wouldn't do that, are all over the place. And this is an incredibly accurate response. And what it actually means is much less ear fatigue, very clear frequency response across the range, arriving all at the same time. Very precise stereo imaging. This is all on paper. I'll tell you what I think about the actual sound of them in a sec. But these are the things that they're very proud of. Right, this slide, this shows the phase response, which in terms of the iLoud precisions is very linear, and there's no kind of wonkiness. The 8K pair 1 and the 8K pair 2, there's a lot more movement across the frequency range. What this actually says in the accompanying paragraph from the Ik website is it leverages its advanced 96K internal DSP system, digital crossover and custom designed audio and audio file amplifiers to deliver true linear phase response above 150 Hz and the very minimum possible phase rotation at low frequencies. This what gives, essentially, according to them, precise stereo imaging, sharp transients, incredibly solid bass and breathtaking detail. The result is stunningly clear, transparent and revealing sound quality that's true to life. Well, that's probably for me to tell you what I think rather than for them to tell you what I think. Anyway, a couple more things. I should also point out that each speaker comes with a set of these little acoustic decoupling pads which you put underneath the speaker. Really handy if you're in a desktop or something that's perhaps got some acoustic properties. You put it on here and it really helps decouple it, and that comes as standard. Now, another feature of the DSP is ARC, which is the Ik Multimedia's room correction. And what this does is it allows you, through the use of this mic, to calibrate using the X Monitor software. You can sort of scan your room at the listening positions, and it will read the frequency response and then attempt to kind of compensate for that in DSP. You can switch this on and off, it doesn't have to be there. Also allows you to load custom speaker profiles, which make it sound like, I don't know, a TV monitor or a little pair of crappy speakers or, some other model. And that actually allows you to kind of listen to your music from a different perspective while retaining just using the same monitors. So this is the X Monitor application. I've got one speaker plugged in. You can see that's the frequency response that I've got. I could calibrate this if I wish. What I would do is, I'll just take you through. You plug the monitor in, you then put the hardware set up, you have positioning, put the positioning mic either side of your ear at certain points. And then what it does is it plays out these kind of whoop frequency responses, records them, and then plots it to your speaker. And then that allows you to use this with the X Monitor software. So if I come back to this, we'll just cancel this and we'll come back here. So I can set up voicing, so I can have comfort, presence, wide dispersion, studio monitors. We can listen to, we can set these to be white 80s, white 90s, which are going to be, you can guess what some of these are. Also hi-fi speakers, multimedia, 49-inch TV, and it allows you to kind of create a number of different sets of listening kind of setups. In practice, this is a little bit weird because you're still looking at these speakers and there's no sort of psychoacoustic clues, because so often, the ear is fooled also by what it sees. So, for instance, if you walked into a massive room that you would expect there to be loads of reverb and there wasn't, it would be a bit confusing. You get a little bit of that with these. So you sort of almost closing your eyes is a better way to listen to the alternative speaker monitors. But I'm sure the more you do it, you'll train your ear to kind of know what's going on and you know what to listen for. So, that's just something to bear in mind. It is useful, but it's a bit weird to begin with. As we can see, we can program the ARC to do kind of various different things. So this little monitor, that means we can program this. The buttons on here will correspond to what's set up in the X Monitor. I'm not going to dwell on that too much because I think really what you're going to want to know is what they sound like, and I can't really show you that, I can only tell you. Now, one thing I will say is the sort of level that these speakers are aiming to kind of operate in, they're competing with stuff that costs a lot. And you can see that in the 8K pair that they're putting in their marketing materials. And I would say I plug them in here. So over in this room here, I have a pair of Focal Alpha 80s, which are 8-inch drivers. They're studio monitors, so I use them for sort of playing and reviewing synths, and I know them quite well. I like the sound of them. They're absolutely fine for what I need. I plugged these in and put them in the space, uncalibrated, and it was literally night and day. I was really quite blown away by several things. The first thing was the stereo imaging was astonishing. I mean, I could really almost pinpoint to the centimetre where things were in the stereo image, and also big, wide, kind of shimmery reverbs and stuff that just sounded absolutely massive. Additionally, we have the bass end. The low end is also really impressive. I mean, I was, again, very surprised at how much bass extension there was. They do sound a lot bigger than they are. I mean, I know these are quite big, but they sound even bigger than that. They sound like you might have a sub with it, and it's very smooth. Also, the transition, the thing that you get with a lot of monitors, because they are active, there's a crossover point, and the point where the amps cross over from feeding the low frequency to the high frequency can result in a lack of clarity in the lower mid and mids, where those frequencies kind of attenuate away from each other. In these speakers, that's not the case. The frequency response across the entire range, and including the very bright, not bright, I would say clear and crystal top end, was again very revealing. I can only say, I mean, I'm not a mix engineer, and my ears are 57 years old, so they're not like they were in the 20s. I mixed quite recently the Moog Ensemble Model D thing in the church. I recorded and mixed a lot of that, and I went to a place where the chap had a pair of SCM ATC SCM20s, the active speakers, and I was blown away by how amazing they sound. This kind of night and day sensation you get. I thought my monitors were okay. They really are not compared to what you can get these days in terms of studio monitors, and these have that. That's the closest I can say that of the sense of night and day and the amount of detail and reveal. I also plugged these in over at my desk over there, which is a much more sort of compromised listening experience. They're very close together. And I listened to a few pieces of music. One which is called Sun Toucher by Groove Armada. It's got a really beautiful, deep, low bottom end, quite a clean mix with a vocal that's very dry and is right down the middle, and it really sounds on these speakers. I thought I knew that track, and I was again amazed at how much detail there was there. Now, I realise there's a lot of talking at this point. I don't know what else to say, because it's quite difficult to kind of to convey it apart from my own listening experience. There were other people in the room when we listened to these, and they were all also really impressed with the low end and just the general size and vibe of these. They also seem pretty loud. They're not necessarily the speakers that you would be vibing for creativity on, because that you want to get a little bit of adrenaline and maybe a bit of distortion and pain from when you're doing beats. You want to get excited. These will give you all of the frequencies you need for that, but it might not be the vibey speakers. But in terms of mixing, I was really surprised at what difference. I have also got a set of Genelec 1029As, which are much smaller. I think they've got a 4 or 5 inch driver, active speakers. Again, night and day, but they're a different level of class. I mean, we're talking ATC speakers cost about £5 a pair. The sort of speakers that these are trying to compete with are up in that area. So that's the sort of detail you're going to get. Right, more talking, I'm afraid. So the only thing I would say is the ARC, when I set it up in this room, it was very easy to do, which is the room correction. I found I didn't like it, and I think it may be because if you look at my room, there's quite a lot of wonkiness in that. You know, that looks like there's a heck of a lot of, you know, room correction going on. Maybe there's just too much room correction, which means they're working very hard. But when I switched it on, I felt that there were sort of things sucked out of the mix it just sounded less natural to me, and that's understandable because it's doing its DSP. I'm not the only one to think this. I think the thing about room correction is it might be very useful if you've got maybe 1 or 2 nodes that are troubling, but if you've got like quite a lot of work for it to do, I think you're probably better off just working without the room correction, because I thought these sounded really good, open and clear without any of that. The other thing to say is many speakers that have DSP in them, while they can sound great, they can introduce a certain amount of latency. And if you're playing real time through them, say you've got a virtual synth going through a DAW and coming out the speakers, in some cases, with some speakers, that can introduce an unacceptable amount of latency. Not so with these guys. The latency was negligible. I didn't even think to bother measuring it, and it was what I was playing in came straight out. So that's not a consideration to worry about. So these are available now. They are shipping now. I think you can buy them. I've seen them in stock in most places that I've looked. Like I say, we've got the dual 5-inch drivers. These are priced, I think, $11.99 each. These ones, which are the 6.5-inch driver, are priced at $9.99 each, this is UK pounds, and the 5-inch ones are priced at £8.99 UK pounds. And I think for the money, you'd be hard pressed to find a speaker that's likely to make such a big difference to perhaps what you're used to listening to. If you're used to, like me, having kind of low to mid-end speakers for your everyday listening, or even hi-fi speakers, buying something like this may well be the key to unlocking mixes and things that you've never been able to figure out, because it's really interesting when you listen to a speaker that reveals so much. Not only is it rather terrifying because you realise maybe how crappy your mixes have been for all that time, but also it allows you to see and visualise so much of what's going on. And I think that's really critical, because if you can get something that sounds even and beautiful on speakers like these, then the chances are it's going to translate pretty well. Of course, you can use the speaker profiles to sort of knock it back and see what they might sound on other speakers. But as I said, that's a little bit strange when you're looking at some big boys like this, and you know, you've got the sound of an iPhone coming out of it, or whatever it may be. But I think I have to say, I would be, and I am pretty tempted. I don't have the sort of money to, and I'm not mixing regularly, really, enough to want a pair of speakers like this. But if that's something that you're doing and you really want to up your game, then looking at this range you're not going to go too far wrong. Obviously, you know, listen to them yourself first. If you can go into a room and listen to them, there's nothing to beat that. I can tell you all of the things that, you know, that I've found, but it may not apply to your ears and your particular taste. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. That was the Ik Multimedia iLoud Precision 6 studio monitors. See you next time.